My name is Jake Thompson, and for the past 12 years, I thought I had it all. A beautiful wife named Emily, two amazing kids, Sarah and Noah, and a cozy house in the suburbs of Seattle. Our home was the quintessential picture of middle-class American life, complete with a white picket fence, a Labrador named Buddy, and a minivan in the driveway. Emily was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, with her striking blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. I always felt like the luckiest man alive to have her by my side. Our neighborhood was a tight-knit community, where everyone knew each other. Weekends were often spent hosting or attending barbecues, kids' birthday parties, and block parties. I worked as an IT manager at a local tech firm, and Emily was a stay-at-home mom who occasionally did freelance graphic design work. Life was busy, but fulfilling. We had our fair share of challenges, but I believed we were solid. Our children were the center of our world. Sarah, our 10-year-old daughter, was a bright and curious girl with a passion for soccer and a knack for getting into mischief. Noah, our 7-year-old son, was quieter and more introspective, preferring to spend his time drawing or building elaborate Lego creations. Buddy, our faithful Labrador, was always by our side, his wagging tail and slobbery kisses a constant source of joy. Our home was filled with laughter, love, and the usual chaos that comes with raising kids. The walls were adorned with family photos, school art projects, and the occasional crayon masterpiece. We had a big backyard where the kids would play for hours, and a cozy living room where we would all snuggle up for movie nights. It was a good life, one that I never took for granted. But as they say, appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life, cracks were starting to form. Cracks that I was too blind, or perhaps too trusting to see. Little did I know that my world was about to be turned upside down in ways I could never have imagined. It all started with small, almost imperceptible changes in Emily's behavior. At first, I chalked it up to the normal stresses of life and parenthood. Emily had always been outgoing and social, but lately she seemed more distant, more preoccupied. She started spending more time on her phone, texting or scrolling through social media, often with a coy smile that she tried to hide when I glanced her way. When I asked her about it, she'd shrug it off and say it was just her friends or some work-related stuff. Our sex life, which had always been passionate and regular, began to dwindle. Emily often complained of being tired or not feeling well, and while I was understanding, it was hard not to feel a little rejected. I suggested we plan a date night, just the two of us, to rekindle the spark. She agreed, but when the night came, she seemed distracted, her mind a million miles away. One night, I noticed that she had a new piece of jewelry, a delicate silver bracelet that I hadn't seen before. When I asked her about it, she told me it was a gift from her friend Jessica for helping her with a graphic design project. I wanted to believe her, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made my gut clench with doubt. Emily also started going out more frequently, claiming she was meeting up with friends or working late on a freelance project. She'd come home late, often smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, and her explanations were always vague and hurried. "Just girl talk," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "You know how we get." My suspicions grew, but I kept them to myself, not wanting to come across as paranoid or controlling. I didn't want to believe that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, could be capable of betraying me. I convinced myself that it was all in my head, that I was overthinking things. After all, Emily had always been loyal and loving. Why would she change now? But the signs were becoming harder to ignore. One evening, as I was putting the kids to bed, I overheard Emily talking on the phone in hushed tones. I couldn't make out much, but the tone of her voice was soft and flirtatious, a tone she hadn't used with me in months. When I walked into the room, she quickly ended the call, her face flushed. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, just Jessica," she replied a little too quickly. "She's having some issues with her boyfriend again." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. I decided to do a little digging, but discreetly. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. I started paying more attention to her phone, her whereabouts, and her interactions with others. One day, while she was in the shower, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages. But there was nothing out of the ordinary, just mundane conversations with friends and family. I felt a pang of guilt for invading her privacy, but my instincts told me there was more to the story. As days turned into weeks, Emily's behavior grew more erratic. She became defensive and irritable whenever I asked about her day or her plans. We started arguing more frequently, and the tension between us was palpable. The loving, carefree woman I had married seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, but I had no idea where to start. All I knew was that the woman I loved was hiding something from me, and it was tearing our family apart. The tipping point came one Friday evening when Emily said she had to work late on a big project. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her laptop bag, and left, saying she'd be back by midnight. As I watched her drive away, a cold sense of dread washed over me. Something about her demeanor felt off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be the night I'd finally learn the truth. After tucking the kids into bed, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Mike, a buddy from work, who had once mentioned a GPS tracking app he used to keep tabs on his teenage daughter. I quickly downloaded the app onto Emily's phone earlier that day, making sure to hide the icon. With a deep breath, I opened the app on my phone and saw a small dot representing Emily's location. She was nowhere near her office. My heart pounded as I watched the dot move across the map, eventually stopping at a hotel downtown. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. There had to be some explanation, some reasonable justification for why she was at a hotel. Maybe she was meeting a client, I tried to convince myself. But deep down, I knew better. I called Mike, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. He immediately offered to come over and watch the kids so I could go and see for myself. Grateful for his support, I waited anxiously for him to arrive. Once he did, I drove to the hotel, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Emily's car. I parked a few spots away and sat there for a moment, trying to gather the courage to confront her. The hotel lobby was brightly lit, a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I approached the front desk and, with a shaky voice, asked if they could tell me which room Emily Thompson was in, explaining that I was her husband. The receptionist, a young woman with a sympathetic smile, hesitated before checking her computer. "Room 312, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thanked her and headed for the elevator, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the third floor, I stood outside room 312, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear muffled voices and laughter from inside. Clenching my fists, I knocked on the door, my mind racing with scenarios of what I might find. The door opened slowly, revealing a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a smug expression that made my blood boil. Behind him, I saw Emily, sitting on the bed, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. She was dressed in a lacy nightgown that left little to the imagination. I felt a sickening twist in my stomach as the reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. "Jake, what are you doing here?" Emily stammered, trying to compose herself. "What am I doing here? What the hell are you doing here, Emily?" I shot back, my voice rising with anger. "Who is this guy?" The man, who introduced himself as Tom, stepped forward, attempting to put on a facade of calm. "Look, man, I didn't know she was married. This isn't what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I scoffed. "You're standing in a hotel room with my wife and she's dressed like that. How stupid do you think I am?" Emily started to cry, her tears doing little to soften the rage I felt. "Jake, please, let me explain." "Explain? What's there to explain, Emily? You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. How long has this been going on?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "A few months," she admitted quietly. "But it didn't mean anything, I swear." "Didn't mean anything? You've destroyed our family for something that didn't mean anything?" I shouted, feeling my world crumble around me. Tom tried to intervene, but I shoved him aside, focusing all my fury on Emily. "How could you do this to us, to our kids? I trusted you, Emily. I loved you." She sobbed uncontrollably, but her tears only fueled my anger. I turned to leave, needing to get out of there before I did something I'd regret. As I walked out of the room, I felt a mix of heartbreak and fury like I'd never experienced before. I had discovered the ugly truth, and there was no going back. The drive home was a blur of rage and disbelief. I couldn't get the image of Emily and Tom out of my head. The betrayal cut deep, and the raw emotions churned inside me like a storm. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I was shaking with fury. Mike was waiting in the living room, his expression somber. "What happened?" he asked gently. "She's cheating on me, Mike," I said, my voice cracking. "I caught her in a hotel room with some guy named Tom." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Jake, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to stay?" "Yeah, thanks. I need to confront her, and I don't want the kids to see this." A few hours later, Emily walked through the door, her face streaked with dried tears. She froze when she saw me standing there, arms crossed and eyes blazing with anger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and controlled. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with fear. "Jake, please, let me explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I want the truth, Emily. How long has this been going on? And don't you dare lie to me." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "It started about 6 months ago. Tom is a client, and it just happened. But it's over now, I promise." "Over?" I laughed bitterly. "I saw you tonight, Emily. You expect me to believe it's over when you were just with him?" "I was going to end it tonight," she said desperately. "I swear, Jake, I love you. I love our family. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to make things right." Her words felt hollow, like empty promises that meant nothing anymore. "Why, Emily? Why did you do it? Was I not enough for you?" "It wasn't about you," she cried. "I felt lost, unappreciated. I needed to feel wanted, and Tom made me feel that way." "So it's my fault?" I shot back. "I wasn't giving you enough attention, so you went and found it elsewhere?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," she sobbed. "I made a horrible mistake, and I'll do anything to fix it." I shook my head, the anger boiling over. "You've destroyed everything, Emily. Our trust, our family. I can't even look at you right now." "Jake, please," she pleaded, reaching out to touch me. I recoiled, unable to bear her touch. "Don't," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I need you to pack your things and leave. I can't do this. I can't be near you." Her face crumpled as she realized the gravity of the situation. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Go to a friend's house. Go to Tom's. I don't care. Just get out." Emily hesitated, looking around as if hoping to find some way to mend the shattered pieces of our life. Finally, she nodded and walked upstairs to pack a bag. I could hear her sobbing as she moved around the bedroom, the sound cutting through me like a knife. When she came back down, she stood in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she whispered. I couldn't respond. The words stuck in my throat. She turned and walked out, the door closing with a soft click that echoed through the empty house. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle over me. The confrontation had been brutal and raw, but it was far from over. The real pain was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and a hollow emptiness that I couldn't shake. Emily called and texted relentlessly, begging for another chance, pleading for forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The betrayal was too fresh, too painful. I found solace in plotting my next move, driven by a burning desire for revenge. My first step was to dig deeper into Tom's life. I wanted to know everything about the man who had torn my family apart. A quick search on social media revealed he was married with 2 kids. His wife, Lisa, appeared to be blissfully unaware of his infidelity. The thought of confronting her and exposing Tom's betrayal was tempting, but I wanted to hit him where it would hurt the most, his career. Tom worked at a prestigious law firm in downtown Seattle. Armed with this information, I decided to gather evidence that would ruin him professionally. I hired a private investigator to follow him and document his interactions with Emily. It didn't take long for the PI to come back with a treasure trove of incriminating photos and videos. There they were, meeting in secret, their illicit affair captured in stark, undeniable detail. With the evidence in hand, I crafted an anonymous letter to Tom's boss, enclosing copies of the photos and a detailed account of his affair with my wife. I knew this would not only destroy his career, but also ensure he could never practice law again. I sent the letter, feeling a grim satisfaction as I dropped it in the mail. Next, I turned my attention to Emily. She was staying with a friend, but I wanted to make her feel the full weight of her actions. I decided to humiliate her publicly, to make sure everyone knew what she had done. I compiled all the evidence of her affair and sent it to our mutual friends and family, along with a message explaining what had happened. I wanted them to see the real Emily, the deceitful, unfaithful woman who had shattered our lives. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Emily's reputation was in tatters, and she was ostracized by our social circle. Friends who once admired her turned their backs, and her parents were devastated. She called me in tears, begging me to stop, but I felt no remorse. She had destroyed me, and now it was her turn to suffer. Tom wasn't spared either. His firm fired him, and his wife filed for divorce, taking their kids and leaving him with nothing. The smug expression I had seen that night at the hotel was replaced with desperation and despair. He tried to contact me, to plead for mercy, but I ignored him. He deserved everything that was coming to him. In the midst of my revenge, I found a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control, making them pay for their betrayal. But as the dust settled, I began to feel a different kind of emptiness. The satisfaction of revenge was fleeting, and the damage done to my family couldn't be undone. My children, who were blissfully unaware of the full extent of what had happened, sensed the tension and asked about their mother. I struggled to find the words to explain, knowing that their lives would never be the same. Emily's texts became more desperate, her calls more frantic. She wanted to talk, to try and salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But I wasn't ready. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what I wanted from the future. The revenge had been sweet, but it hadn't healed the wound. I knew the next step was to confront Emily one last time, to have the conversation that would determine the fate of our relationship and the future of our family. A week later, after some time to cool down and reflect, I agreed to meet Emily. We decided to talk at a neutral location, away from the prying eyes of our children and the lingering memories of our home. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place we used to visit in the early days of our relationship. As I sat at a corner table waiting for her to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of finality. Emily walked in, looking worn and fragile. The confident, vibrant woman I had known was gone, replaced by someone who seemed broken and desperate. She sat down across from me, her eyes red from crying. "Jake," she began, her voice trembling, "thank you for meeting me. I know I don't deserve it after everything I've done." I nodded, keeping my emotions in check. "We need to talk about what happens next, Emily. We can't keep living like this." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to apologize for. I wish I could take it all back." "You can't," I replied, my voice cold and distant. "The damage is done. But we have to think about the kids and what's best for them." "I know," she said, wiping her tears. "I want to make things right, Jake. I'll do whatever it takes." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "We need to get a divorce, Emily. There's no way we can move past this. The trust is gone, and I can't see us ever getting back to what we were." She looked down, her shoulders shaking as she cried. "I understand. I don't want to hurt you anymore. I'll cooperate with whatever you need." "We need to figure out custody arrangements for Sarah and Noah," I continued, trying to stay focused. "They need stability, and we have to make this as easy on them as possible." Emily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I agree. They're the most important thing in our lives. I don't want them to suffer because of my mistakes." "We'll share custody," I said, my tone firm. "I want them to have both of us in their lives, but they'll stay with me most of the time. I can't trust you right now, and they need a stable home." "Okay," she said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right for them." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our conversation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Emily spoke again. "Jake, I know you hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But please, don't let this destroy you. You deserve to be happy, to find someone who will treat you the way you deserve." "I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again," I admitted, my voice raw with emotion. "You were my everything, Emily. You were my best friend, my partner, and you destroyed that." "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is try to make amends and be a better person for our kids." I nodded, feeling a sense of resignation wash over me. We'll get through this, somehow. For Sarah and Noah. We finished our conversation, discussing the practical details of the divorce and custody arrangements. It was a painful and necessary conversation, one that left me feeling hollow and exhausted. As we stood to leave, Emily reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away, the pain still too fresh. "Goodbye, Emily," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Goodbye, Jake," she replied, her eyes filled with regret. I walked out of the cafe, feeling the weight of our broken marriage pressing down on me. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew it was the only way forward. For the sake of our children and my own sanity, I had to let go of the past and start rebuilding my life, one step at a time. The months leading up to the divorce trial were a whirlwind of paperwork, lawyer meetings, and emotional turmoil. Emily and I tried to keep things as civil as possible for the sake of Sarah and Noah, but the tension was palpable. Every interaction was strained, every decision fraught with the pain of our broken trust. Our lawyers negotiated the terms of the divorce, including the division of assets and custody arrangements. Emily moved into a small apartment nearby, close enough to maintain regular contact with the kids. We agreed on a shared custody arrangement, but with me as the primary custodian. Emily would have them on weekends and a few days during the week. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best we could do under the circumstances. The day of the trial arrived, a gray and rainy Tuesday that seemed to reflect the mood of the entire process. We sat in the courtroom, flanked by our respective lawyers, as the judge reviewed the details of our case. The atmosphere was tense and somber, the reality of our failed marriage laid bare for all to see. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, asked us a series of questions about our agreement. She wanted to ensure that the custody arrangement was in the best interest of the children, and that both parties understood the implications of their decisions. Emily and I answered her questions politely, our voices steady but tinged with the weight of our shared history. When it came time for the judge to make her ruling, I held my breath, the enormity of the moment pressing down on me. "Based on the evidence presented and the agreement reached by both parties," she began, "I find that the proposed custody arrangement and division of assets are fair and in the best interest of the children. The divorce is hereby granted, and the terms outlined in the agreement will be legally binding." With those words, it was over. Our marriage, once a source of joy and comfort, was now officially dissolved. Emily looked over at me, her eyes filled with sadness and resignation. I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze, the pain still too raw. Outside the courtroom, we had one last conversation. It was brief, filled with awkward silences and unspoken emotions. "I hope we can find a way to be good co-parents for Sarah and Noah," she said, her voice trembling. "They need us to be strong for them." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "We will. For them." As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The legal battle was over, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. I drove home in silence, the reality of my new life sinking in. I was now a single father, navigating the complexities of parenthood without the partner I had once relied on. The days that followed were a blur of adjusting to new routines and trying to create a sense of normalcy for the kids. Sarah and Noah were resilient, but they could sense the change. They asked questions about their mother, and I did my best to answer them honestly without causing more pain. Emily and I remained civil, exchanging the kids at designated times and trying to communicate effectively for their sake. It was a difficult balancing act, but we both knew it was necessary. The trial had marked the end of one chapter of our lives, but the story was far from over. We had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild our lives, and create a new sense of stability for our children. As I settled into my new role, I realized that the trial was just one step in a long journey of healing and growth. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to navigate it with strength and resilience. For the sake of my kids and my own sanity, I had to find a way to turn the page and start a new chapter in our lives. Life after the divorce was an uphill battle, but it was also an opportunity for a fresh start. I dedicated myself to being the best father I could be for Sarah and Noah, creating a stable and loving environment despite the turbulence we had endured. The house, once filled with the echoes of a shattered marriage, slowly became a sanctuary of healing and new beginnings. Work became my refuge, a place where I could focus my energy and regain a sense of normalcy. My colleagues at the tech firm were supportive, giving me space when I needed it and distracting me with the usual office banter. Mike, in particular, became a pillar of strength, always ready with a listening ear and practical advice. Emily and I settled into a co-parenting rhythm. The wounds of betrayal still lingered, but we both knew that our children's well-being had to come first. Sarah and Noah adapted to the new arrangement better than I had hoped. Their resilience amazed me, and their happiness became my primary motivation. We established new traditions and routines, creating memories that were entirely our own. In the evenings, after the kids were asleep, I found solace in hobbies I had long neglected. I took up running again, finding peace in the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement. I dusted off my old guitar, strumming away the sadness with melodies that spoke of hope and renewal. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my life piece by piece. One Saturday, while picking up the kids from Emily's apartment, she approached me with a tentative smile. "Jake, I know things have been tough between us, but I want to thank you for being such a great dad to Sarah and Noah. They're lucky to have you." I nodded, the bitterness I once felt towards her now replaced with a weary acceptance. "We're doing this for them, Emily. They deserve the best." As the months turned into a year, the raw pain of the past began to fade. I even found myself opening up to the possibility of love again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I knew I couldn't let my past define my future. I had learned to trust my instincts and value my worth, realizing that I deserved to be happy and loved. Then one day I met Lisa. She was a single mother with a son around Noah's age. We connected over shared experiences and a mutual understanding of the complexities of life after divorce. Our relationship blossomed slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. Lisa's warmth and kindness brought light into my life, reminding me that love could be gentle and healing. Our children became fast friends, and we often spent weekends together, exploring parks, museums, and other family-friendly adventures. The laughter of our blended family filled the air, a soothing balm for the wounds of the past. Emily eventually found her own path to redemption. She sought therapy, worked on herself, and made amends where she could. While our relationship would never be what it once was, we managed to find a semblance of friendship, united by our love for our children. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I had grown. The betrayal and heartache had tested me in ways I never thought possible, but it had also revealed my inner strength. I learned to set boundaries, to value my own happiness, and to forgive, not just Emily, but myself as well. Life, I discovered, was not about holding on to the past, but about embracing the future with open arms. The experiences had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I was more than a man who had been betrayed. I was a father, a friend, and a man capable of love and resilience. As I stood in the backyard, watching Sarah and Noah play with Buddy, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. Lisa stood beside me, her hand in mine, and I knew that we had all found our way to a new beginning. The past was a chapter in our story, but the future was ours to write. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful and ready to embrace whatever came next.